Welcome to the FF Forge. My name is Steve, and today we are going to cover the injuries from over the weekend. That's right, week 1 of the NFL season is in the books now, and a lot of things have happened. You know, I got a lot of predictions right, I have a lot of predictions wrong, but it's only after 1 week. I'm not about to take any victory laps. We're not here to overreact. That's not a good thing. Just because, talking real football here, just because your team won or lost, that doesn't mean that the rest of the season is going to be all horrible or all great. There's a long season ahead of us, and that's true of fantasy football. And just like NFL teams, we need to continue to make our rosters better to the best of our abilities. And so that's what we're going to do here with our waiver wires for week 1. Starting off with the injuries. You might be able to hear my crazy cat in the background. She thinks it's feeding time, and it's about 3 hours ahead of time right now, so she's crazy. Week 1, injuries. Deontay Johnson had a hamstring. 1 to 2 weeks is the average time of recovery that it takes for a hamstring injury. Of course, we all know hamstring injuries can derail an entire season for a player, so it's obviously very concerning, but without knowing the severity of it at this point in time, that's the average, 1 to 2 weeks, and we have at least 2 more hamstrings to come up, but one of them we're not going to be so concerned about. On to Pat Freiermuth, tight end, had a chest injury. He got smashed between one guy behind him, and then the next guy came and absolutely cracked him in the chest. He came back into the game, and he scored a touchdown, and then he was ruled out for the rest of the game after that. So, who knows? Painful. The fact that he went back into the game is promising. Have no idea of how, without knowing anything else, how long that recovery time may be. Could be back next week, maybe not. J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, terrible. Torn Achilles, season ender. Sucks. Absolutely sucks. Greg Dulcich, hamstring, 1 to 2 weeks. Once again, that's the average without knowing the severity of it or anything else like that. That was the average that I was able to find on the internet for hamstring NFL, hamstring recovery time. Aaron Jones had a hamstring. I'm not concerned about it. He was running into the end zone, go Pack go, and he had a, right as he crossed the goal line, right before that, there was a player coming from this way towards him as he's running. He just tweaked his route a little bit, and immediately went for his hamstring and grabbed it. And to me, you could even see the hamstring kind of tweak. He explained it as it being bit, and I'm not concerned about it. It seemed to me like it wouldn't be a major deal immediately when it happened, and he just kind of tweaked it a little bit. And so I'm optimistic about his return. Evan Hall today came out. He has a knee injury. Today is Monday, by the way, so forgot to mention there are some things that I had to guesstimate before tonight's game. By the way, green for my ex-quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, going to support the New York Jets tonight. I like both teams, but go Jets, go. That's how that's said. And so for Evan Hall, wonderful transition. He had a knee, and it's going to take some time, or he could be out for some time. So I have no clue. Could be 1 week, could be 10 weeks. I don't know. Don't even know what the injury is, just that it's to his knee. And last up, Jacoby Myers just came through a little bit earlier. Concussion. He had a head injury. Now I remember what the transition was before the Evan Hall thing was, because it's still Monday before the game has happened. But yeah, Jacoby Myers concussion, 1 week is the 9 days is the expected recovery time. So might be out, but had a nice week 1, so that's good for those who went on a limb and drafted him. Now let's look at the waiver wire options for the week. Starting off with the quarterback position. Just a quick, these are the next 3 weeks, going from 1 to 3 there, as far as, the matchups for these quarterbacks that I have on the roster list. Went through, and I just looked at guys who are less than 60% owned on ESPN rosters to make the list. I will probably pull that back to less than 50 or 40% at some point in the season, but it's week 1. Things are a little bit more widespread right now, so we want to take a look at the bigger picture. But if there's a guy on here that's on your free agency and he waiver wire and he didn't make this list, that doesn't necessarily mean I don't think you should take him over anybody here. It just means he didn't make that cutoff. And last thing over on the way right, strength of schedule for the entirety of the season, not just like these 3 games that I listed. Just want to provide, I think, all the most relevant information in one little quick snapshot for these players. But when it comes to my quarterbacks, I think that Jordan Love and Brock Purdy are must-roster guys after week 1. It might be a little bit of a strong statement, especially for Jordan Love. But in part, looking at next week's matchup against Atlanta, then New Orleans, Detroit, it's a semi-upside. It's not the hardest schedule in the world between those 3 teams. So I think there's some upside in the short term to them, and the season-long upside is supposed to be very good. And these will change. I believe these are still based on last season. Just went with the Fantasy Pros their star rating system that they have. Moving on to the could roster quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Matt Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo. Just like at draft day, I think they're all rosterable guys. I think they'll have good weeks, and they did start off with some pretty solid week 1 games. I didn't necessarily rank guys in order of the schedule, and that's part of the reason why I have this here for you to look at. And then we have a stream and see for Baker Mayfield. This is a good week 1, but I basically expected it to be going up against Minnesota. Really not a secondary that I have a whole lot of confidence in Minnesota. And so, yeah, I'm going to like the quarterback options opposite of them. But that said, Baker did look fine. So, got Chicago next week. It's a good matchup. He's a streamer for me. I don't know who I'm playing him over, but in some circumstances, you could go ahead and play Baker with a certain amount of confidence and see how he does here. We just saw Mac Jones absolutely get a lot of fantasy points against Philadelphia. Then New Orleans after that, not the best matchup in the world, but just like I said for Jordan Love, it's not the worst either. You can beat them. And so it is supposed to be a good season-long schedule there for Baker Mayfield. And those are my current quarterback waivers. Also, things might change throughout the week. So first of all, after tonight's game, if there's anything that would change on here, which there probably will be, I'll put that right down in the comments as soon as this video is uploaded, basically. And yeah, if there's anything big, that just happens throughout the week, somebody gets injured during practice, or I change an opinion, I'll come up here and update the waiver wire. This will be up on the website. That's where I would update it to. www.thefforge.com, link down in the description and maybe right below me as well. So, onto the running backs. We have my must-roster options, Josh Kelly. I spoke a lot about him in the early portion of the offseason, and then I kind of forgot about him for a while, and then I started talking about him again once the preseason kicked in. He has looked good since the last season, since halfway through last season, we'll just say, since the back half of last season. He has looked good. And this new offense, with the new offensive coordinator, they will be utilizing 2 backs to take some of the load off of Eckler. That was my suspicion, and that is exactly what we saw in week 1, and so that is where I expected that, and that's why I was talking about him in the early portion of the offseason. And the best part of it all in terms of Josh Kelly is that in a game where you easily could have done what Miami did and just gone with an all-out air raid, they really ran the ball a lot, very heavily. And so I think that makes Josh Kelly, if there's an injury to Eckler, he'll be potentially a stud. And even without that, he seems to be potentially startable. Not the best matchup next week. We're going up against Tennessee, but season long, really like him quite a bit. Strength of schedule is not great for him, but what can you do sometimes? On to Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. I kind of wanted to put them lower because there's some risk here. Who's it going to be? Is it just going to be a split between them? Maybe it will be a split between them and Melvin Gordon. Maybe we'll get 3 people in here and it'll just be a disaster. It's also going to be a heavier pass attack for this offense compared to the previous regime's offense. Not really regime, but offensive coordinator. And so there's a lot of question marks. I started talking about Justice Hill once the preseason had started, and I believe it was an announcer that I heard that talked about him and how much the coaching staff loves him and that he was going to win the number 2 role. I don't know that he really won the number 2 role, but I did suspect that maybe in the event of an injury, he might be the guy that would be the number 1, the 1A out of him and Gus Edwards, and I'm going to kind of stick with that. On top of that, Justice Hill in week 1, I think even when Dobbins was healthy, got some of the goal line work. I believe he got all of the goal line work throughout the entirety of the game. So, valuable carries for an offense that we do expect to look better than it looked in week 1 as that offense evolves and learns and gets comfortable with itself. So, I would take Justice Hill over Gus Edwards. Both of them solid. You got to take a shot on these guys. Somebody does in your league, that's for sure. So they're must-roster guys. And so, valuable. Kenneth Gainwell. Talked about him a lot. Yeah, going to be the starter. For the foreseeable future, he's apparently going to get the bulk of the carries. And so on that offense, I do want that. I don't absolutely love it, and I don't absolutely love this season-long strength of schedule. But I might be firing him up next week in my RB2 spot. It's probably going to be a pain and a hassle every single week. On to Tyler Algier, guy that I really liked for reasons that I'm just not going to showboat on some of my off-season takes. But I do expect for this first half of the season, until the point where the playoffs are in reach and the Atlanta Falcons are in the playoff hunt, I really like Tyler Algier. It's at that point that I think they go full bore with Bijan Robinson, and he would get a lot of work at that point. But until then, I think they're going to be a little bit conservative with his usage. But, hey, he was an absolute stud with the usage that he did get. And I think Tyler Algier is going to continue to provide some value for a while now. Kyren Williams. I wish I was on top of this one a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, he might be the lead back within no time here over Cam Akers there in the Los Angeles Rams. Not a great matchup next week, though. Then we have potentially more than a stash. And Jaylen Warren, Roschon Johnson is tough to stay. That they fall somewhere in between must-roster and high-end stash for me. They're not must-roster guys, but they could be next week or the week after. Like, it's on the they're on the edge right now. So as far as Jaylen Warren goes, he only got outrushed, I think it was, he rushed 3 times and Harris rushed 6 times. So a 2-to-1 rate there. So he was fairly involved, technically, with the rushing attack. And on top of that, he had 6 targets, was more than Najee. So I am, it's looking like Najee is going to end up having some disappointed owners. We'll just say it like that. Then as far as Roschon Johnson goes, it's not so much the end result of the fantasy points that he scored that I liked. Had that happen on my bench, could have used that this week. But anyways, it was how he played. He played really hard. He looked really good. It was mostly garbage time production that he had, but he was highly productive. I don't think it was against backups, probably in part maybe some backups. It was against a defense that, was playing more of a prevent style defense and all that. But he played really, really hard. He looked better and like he wanted to play football more than Khalil Herbert did all game. This is the reason I drafted him. I think he has a chance of taking over that RB1 spot this season, and he made a little bit of an argument for it here in week 1. Don't know how much of that was a surprise or not to the coaching staff, but like the prospects there for Roschon Johnson. On to my high-end stashes, we got Tank Higsby. It wasn't a good game for him. It really was not, but the coaches showed patience with him, and that means that they have a lot of faith and trust in him, and I think that they want him to be as involved as they can get him in this offense, realistically, with ETN still being there. But I do think that they want him to be have a role in this offense, and he did have a role. He just had a really bad game, but they kept going back to him. It was like I don't know, a ball. Either he missed it or it just bounced off his helmet, whatever. Ended up being an interception, and then he had kind of a boneheaded play where he picked up the ball, and it was live, and a defender took it from him. But they went back to him. He got his touchdown after both of those things. And then Elijah Mitchell here as a high-end stash. Obviously, it's San Francisco. So if anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey, given how they looked in week 1, that's going to be a darn valuable running back spot. I'm surprised he was this little owned. And then Jerome Ford. Cleveland's defense looks much better. That'll help them. They want to be a rushing offense. He had quite a bit of usage. Did I write it down? No, I was surprised at how much usage he had. I assume a fair bit of that was in junk time for him as well. junk time, whatever that is. But he's still a valuable backup. Maybe high end's a little bit too strong. Maybe he should be at the top of the other stash options along with like Sean Tucker. That could be. Then a potential spot starter kind of guys. CEH had a fair bit of involvement with this offense in week 1. They do have Jacksonville, so it wouldn't be the worst place to spot start either of these weeks. You're probably not going to trust that unless you're really in dire circumstances for your running back spot this week. But this is more talking about, these are guys I expect the season long here to be potential spot starters. This has really nothing to do with the next matchups. Just want to show what the next matchups are coming up, so that way you can determine if maybe you have some interest in them or not. Tyjae Spears was not, he had 4 targets. He was not used on the ground very much at all, but those 4 targets are promising, and that can be quite valuable in a full PPR format for sure. Devin Singletary, I do not have the snap counts yet, but he did come out very close to splitting the workload with Damian Harris in this game, so I'd be interested to see what the actual snap counts were, but that was one of those preseason things that I thought would happen, and then well, prior to the preseason, and then the preseason led me to believe, well, maybe I was just wrong on that. But based on week 1, it seems that he does have a role, and that's going to hurt Dameon Pierce. And I'd say 2 solid matchups for him coming up. At least Jacksonville for sure. I like that for him being you would think the pass catching back, although Dameon Pierce had more receptions than him and targets, I believe. Devon Achane, Jeff Wilson Jr., other potential spot starters. So it was a weird week in Miami. They clearly just wanted to throw the ball all day, every play, and it should have been more clear pre-game when they healthy scratched Devon Achane that, okay, they're just not planning on running. I wish I would have caught on to that a little bit better. I don't know if that changed. I don't think that would have changed much except for how high I was on Raheem Mostert. But we'll talk about that when we get to the recapping my running back stuff for my running back rankings this week. But Jeff Wilson Jr., Raheem Mostert, I don't know. It was weird. They had Salvin Ahmed in on the first play of the game. Just seems like is this backfield really Raheem Mostert's? I know that you're giving it to him in week 1, but the vibes were wrong for me, which would mean that maybe Jeff Wilson could come into a role when he comes back. So if you have IR spots, and you have an easy opportunity to put him in one, I think he's worth a stash. And then other stash options. Sean Tucker, Rachaad White was once again very inefficient. So that's not good for Rachaad White and may give Sean Tucker a little seam to get some work in and work his way into more of a workload, and who knows where that could lead. Zamir White, in the event, all 3 of these guys are just in the event that the starter would go, they're good enough backups that I have some amount of trust in them or the offense that they're on, that I would like them. Then I wouldn't stash them, put them on my roster. Melvin Gordon. If Melvin Gordon's going to be relevant, that probably means that that's a 3-headed backfield between Melvin Gordon, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. And so that's not really something that I want to get involved in. I don't think he becomes the number 1 RB, the 1A out of a 1B or C even. So not something I want to mess with. And then Chuba Hubbard. Still, I wouldn't. The rookie-led offense, I just don't have a whole lot of faith in that with the backup running back if he were to ever get the starting opportunity. And he did have a decent day as a backup running back. He had 9 carries. But this matchup could be the most rushing attempts that the Carolina Panthers will have all season long. And so I think that goes a long ways towards why he had 9 carries. Moving on to the wide receivers. And my must rosters are going to be Romeo Doubs, Elijah Moore, Puka Nacua, in this order. So Romeo Doubs, he has a chance to be the most consistent, best wide receiver in this offense. I love Christian Watson, and I think it very well could and should be him as he will be like the wide receiver 1 once he's back and healthy. But there's also that concern, the health and being back and healthy. How they utilized Romeo Doubs showed how much they like him in a very limited role this week. Still got 2 touchdowns. They were using him in the important areas of the field. And while he was on the field, he made a difference. And so in year 2, I was very surprised to see that he was not more rostered already. And the strength of schedule is in favor of him so far, right now, for the rest of the season. Elijah Moore, he had a lot of targets. Let's see, the stat line is not fantastic, but he matched Amari Cooper to lead the receiving core with 7 targets each. And so I really like him going forward. I already liked him coming in. Another guy I was a little surprised to see the roster share was less than like 50, 60%. Maybe it wasn't less than 50. Puka Nacua. What a surprise. What a welcome surprise. So awesome to see that. He had 15 targets in this game. Can't remember. I think he maybe caught like 9 of them. That's nothing. You know, that's not nothing. That is something. And out of the receivers there, once they get Cooper Kupp back, he is the guy who's like should be the least affected by that as far as his role in the offense. I think he'll continue to have a role. I think there's a chance for Puka to be fantasy relevant this season with Matt Stafford as his quarterback. Not a great strength of schedule there, a little concerning. Not a great, matchup next week. But then we got Cincinnati, Indianapolis after that, so that's a little bit better. Onto the should rosters: Nico Collins, Rashid Shaheed, Rashee Rice. I think they all definitely should be rostered. Just a little bit of a step below these guys for me. Rashid Shaheed, because of what I think will be an inconsistent week in and week out performance. Just so happened that week 1 was one of his big weeks. Rashee Rice, because there is, it's not going to happen this week or next week, which are great matchups. Probably not, at least. And then you got the New York Jets. Like, you should roster them if you can. But, and there's not better options out there. But I think he could be valuable. It's just, you can't expect it real quickly. And then Nico Collins, I think week in and week out, he is the number 1 wide receiver there. And we saw a little bit of that in week 1. So continue to think that. Usable guys. These are guys where it really has nothing to do with this week's matchup, next week's matchup, the matchup in 10 weeks. These are guys that you could grab. You could hold on to them for 1 week. You can hold on to them for 3 weeks at any point throughout the year. And you can drop him after he's helped you for whatever time period, 2 out of 5 weeks or something, whatever time period. Doesn't matter. They're just usable guys that appear to be on waiver wires right now, and I think will be on and off rosters throughout the season, especially throughout those bye weeks and whatnot. So that's going to be Tyler Boyd, Zay Jones, obviously in this order, Curtis Samuel, Alan Lazard. We'll see a little bit tonight on him, on Mecole Hardman. Mecole could absolutely be removed from this list. Alan Lazard could be put on the could roster list. They'll have some movement. This is just where I'm kind of expecting at least one of them to land. Then Robert Woods, rookie quarterback, and he's the solid veteran in the slot right now. So we saw him get a good target share. We knew this was possible coming into the season, and they looked good enough in week 1 that I think that's possibly here to stay. Then Kendrick Bourne had a really good week 1. This is a little bit more of a short-time usable, but potentially long-term usable guy. Next week, going up against Miami, though, 2 thumbs up for that. When Devontae Parker returns to the team, we'll see how that shakes up the chemistry of that offense. But Kendrick Bourne's always been a guy I like quite a bit, and he's definitely had his big games for New England, and even before that with San Francisco. A little bit inconsistent, a little bit hard to trust, but maybe this will be his year where he's quite reliable. Who knows? That's a 1 week possible overreaction there. Josh Reynolds, maybe he should be above him because I think this is less of an overreaction. However, once this offense gets, I can't even think of his name anymore, Jameson Williams back, then I'm less high up on this. But for the next several weeks, Josh Reynolds would be a solid person to take. Seattle, Atlanta over the next couple of weeks, especially the Seattle matchup. Might want to try to take advantage of that if you need help. Devontae Parker, whenever he ends up coming back and he's healthy, he can be good. He usually doesn't end the season well, but he can be good for a few games. And then Mecole Hardman, if he's going to end up being a part of this offense, if it's a good offense like I expect it to be, he could provide some nice pop some weeks here or there. Stream and C, Jaden Reed, Allen Robinson. These guys are they're ahead of basically up to like Curtis Samuel for my usable guys right now as far as would I take them this week. Jaden Reed, with the injury currently to Christian Watson's, getting a little bit extra of an opportunity, and although the stat line wasn't amazing, he really did look good out there. Like, he really did. did his best to make Jordan Love look as good as Jordan Love could look. Not all things ended up as a catch, but he looked great. Allen Robinson, with the injury to Deontay Johnson, assuming he's going to be out this coming up weekend, he led the team in targets this past week, and so I think we could see that again. He could be just a solid, safe pick. Going up against Cleveland, though, so, maybe not. It's a tough matchup for receivers. Then on to the could roster guys, and it depends how you feel on them, but I'm fine if you decide to roster them. I'm not going to chastise you for it. That's Kadarius Toney, Tutu Atwell, and Josh Downs. Josh Downs had 7 targets this week. It was the second most on the team for all of the receivers. That was something that I thought was potential for him, and then it didn't even look like he was going to win that spot coming into the season. But he did win it, and he got some targets. Didn't catch a whole lot of them. Then, watch list. Tank Dell, Calvin Austin, Demario Douglas of New England. Just keeping an eye on him. Demario Douglas, part of his usage comes down to Devontae Parker's health. So, not somebody I'm really trying to grab right now, but once Devontae Parker is back, does he still have a role? Is he still producing? Then I would definitely have interest in him. Calvin Austin, he and Allen Robinson kind of should operate for the same role for that offense, but he looked pretty good finally. He was just a rookie last season, so I liked him as a rookie. I think he should make a great slot receiver. Could be a low ADOT, high target, kind of safe, high floor kind of guy this season. That's possible. And then Tank Dell would be the opposite of that. He could be your explosive, huge game, boom or bust kind of guy. And it looked like he could be more than that, though, this preseason. But for now, he's on the watch list. He's not one of the starters. He doesn't have enough usage. So as soon as that usage starts creeping up, then you might want to jump on him as a flyer. And you could, but I wouldn't. The Miami receivers both had good games, a good amount of targets. But I think I talked about this Miami, their attitude, their offensive plan coming into this week. It was just pass, 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 run, pass, 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 run, was the plan coming into the week. So everybody got involved, and it was fun, and I like those guys. I just don't think they're fantasy relevant. In case somebody else is leading you to think differently, that's my opinion on that. Then on to the tight ends, and I just have these set in tiers. That's a child abduction. Palm Beach. Tier 1. I have Sam Laporta at the top of this list. It comes down to production, how good he looked week 1. I thought it was kind of for how good he looked, I thought the fantasy results were kind of disappointing. But yeah, I'll take a shot at him. Really like him. So I did not put names on these. This is really more of a, kind of a tier list of how who I would grab this week. A little less nuanced. Then Hayden Hurst right up there. We all knew that it was potential, the rookie quarterback to the tight end kind of thing. And so after 1 week, that appears to be the deal. The main concern for me, why I wasn't a little bit higher up on him, was thinking that Adam Thielen might be his safety blanket. But after week 1, that was not the case. So excited for the floor for Hayden Hurst. Just less of a ceiling because of that offense, because of the quarterback, than Sam Laporta for me. Then Logan Thomas, talked about him. He was really high in my rankings to start the offseason, my first rankings video. And it's because of this offense. And of course, the talent that has never quite come to fruition. That's Logan Thomas and his injuries. But in week 1, he got targeted quite heavily. So Hayden Hurst had 7 targets. That was the most of any target for Bryce Young in week 1. Logan Thomas had 8 targets in week 1. I expect those targets to be a little less consistent than somebody like Hayden Hurst week in and week out to an extent. But it was nice to see some of my suspicions for that tight end role in that Washington offense seemingly come true in week 1. So I think Logan Thomas is definitely worth a roster spot. Zach Ertz had 10 targets in week 1. That was great. Trust the offense, trust the quarterback a little bit less, actually, than Washington, which is something to say. And Luke Musgrave just didn't quite have the week 1 for me to say, oh my God, and he could have, though. Here's the thing. If his week went just a little bit differently, maybe he would have made the top of this list for me. But that probably would have been inaccurate for me to do. He was very efficient, which is great. He could have had 2 touchdowns, which is obviously great, but he didn't have any. He had the second most receiving yards on the team, which is obviously great. That goes back to being very efficient. But it was a weird game for him, and the offense isn't at full strength without Christian Watson, and still only 5 targets. This offense is going to be run heavy. So I like him as a boom-bust guy. I don't know so much as a week-in and week-out guy like these other players. And Jake Ferguson was really toting the line here between Tier 1 and Tier 2. But he had 7 targets, I believe. We got 7 targets, led the team, but it was a weird game. If you watched, just the first half is really all you need to know about how weird of a game it was. And so the box score sucks, but and that's because he and Dak Prescott were just really not on the same page at all. And that was basically the only concern about Jake Ferguson this offseason was, is he a talented enough of a tight end to take advantage of the situation and the quarterback who's going to give him opportunities. If he keeps dropping balls and I don't know if he was not where he was at always, but there was 3 or 4 times where they just were not on the same page, or Jake Ferguson just didn't quite make the catch where he could have and should have. So just a little bit concerning, but also the high. I still love the upside for Jake Ferguson in that offense this season. Once again, very close to being a Tier 1 guy. Irv Smith Jr., Tier 2. I don't know that I rely on it week in and week out, but he did have 5 targets in what was a yucky game. I don't know if that's a result of Cleveland's defense doing so well against wide receivers, or if that's going to be kind of commonplace. If he can get 5 targets in every game in that offense, he'll be what I thought he was, which would make him this kind of Tier 2, sort of like with those wide receivers, the usable guys. He's usable to me. Durham Smythe, I don't know if he's usable yet, but maybe we overlooked this guy. He has shown flashes as the second tight end on this offense, like last season, and I think before that, and it was a good game. 7 targets. Once again, they went into this game with this really pass-heavy game plan that you're not going to see every single week from Miami. You wouldn't think. I think that had a lot to do with the matchup. Not that they're not always going to be slightly pass-happy, but it was good to see, and you think about the other weapons on the offense, that should open things up for him. Usable in good matchups. Take a chance on him. I think he might be that guy this season. And that leaves us to I'm going to kind of group in these New England tight ends. Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's the starter. That's why I was a little bit surprised that Gesicki, I think, was going higher in drafts, at least for a while this offseason. And I was like, I know Gesicki's a great receiver, but it's not like Hunter Henry's a bad receiving tight end, and he'll be on the field much more. And so far, for 1 week, he did have 6 of 9 targets that went to the tight ends, but that is 9 targets that went to the tight end position. This is the New England offense that we've seen some great tight ends come out of, so that's promising. I just think that it's going to be one tight end or the other. More weeks it'll be Hunter Henry, but I don't think every week it will be, and I think that he's a guy who could easily bite you in the butt when you go ahead and trust him. So I kind of want to wait and see it. It's definitely not at the top of this list for me, and I don't think he ever will be. And a little bit of a surprise, might be a little bit of an overreaction to week 1, but this was who I thought Chigoziem Okonkwo was, and I do not want to encourage you to drop him. Just make sure you have 2 tight ends if you have Chig Okonkwo, or just play him every single week, at least for the first 5 weeks here, and if he doesn't do anything for those 5 weeks, then you can give up on the experiment. But if you took Chig, you should have known that this was going to happen some weeks. Once they got DeAndre Hopkins, he no longer was going to be somebody that they were going to, would be a part of basically every week's game plan. And he would have fewer targets, and he would be inconsistent. And I think that's all it is. But if I'm hunting on the waiver wire and I don't have Chig Okonkwo, and Chig's on the waiver wire, I'm probably going for a lot of these guys. But once again, if I'm going for like a tight end 2, I'll take the upside shot on Chig Okonkwo, at least over Irv Smith Jr. here even. So I just want to make that clear. But yeah, this is my tier 3. I do expect him to be very inconsistent and to be a headache if you went that route with Chig. But he should still have some huge weeks at the tight end spot that some guys just aren't going to be able to do. But who knows? I don't know. It's a risk right now after the week 1 looks so yucky for the team as a whole. Juwan Johnson, Also in Tier 3, Tyler Conklin, Mike Gesicki. As I said, he only got 3 of the 9 targets there. Kylan Granson had 6 targets. He is a previous wide receiver convert to the tight end position. In college, played wide receiver early on in college and in high school. He kind of plays like a wide receiver. I think they kind of utilized him like a wide receiver if I had to guess. And so that was nice to see those 6 targets. Somebody had totally overlooked. Yeah. So keeping an eye on him. And same with Adam Troutman. We'll see what he does in week 2. You know, I'm not trying to pick these guys up off the waiver wire. Tyler Conklin, we'll kind of wait and see what happens this week. But yeah, Adam Troutman, especially with the injury to Greg Dulcich, he could become something. And for my DST streamers in this order, based on the matchups and how good they looked in week 1, or maybe previous faith I have in them, Browns, Lions, Chiefs, Bengals, Packers, all defenses that not only are they streamers, but I think you could probably keep around, depending on how you work your DSTs. Maybe if you have 2 of them, definitely would be worth a roster spot as a second DST, depending on who you currently have, as well as depending on the next few weeks of matchups. I just think that they're probably pretty good defenses overall. But week 1, Browns going up against Pittsburgh. Out of the DSTs that are less than 60% owned, that's an absolute must smash hit there. Lions going up against Seattle. I like the Lions defense. This matchup is a little bit, could go wonky, if you will, with the Lions. Chiefs, Jacksonville, like the upside there of Jacksonville. For a pick is what I'm looking for there. Same with the Bengals, just kind of looking for a pick. Whereas the Packers against Atlanta, not going to be a whole lot of throws, not going to be a whole lot of plays in the game overall. So they're just kind of a safe floor team this week. But I do think that defense looked good finally after they've had the talent, but the coaching or something just hasn't been there. Week 1, they sure look good. And then Giants matching up against Arizona next week. They'll probably be a popular choice for people. And Broncos going up against Washington. This is another one where I like the defense, and I think that provides some interception upside. So that is it. Once again, you can find all of this up on the website. Some of it may be updated throughout the week at my website, just down in the description. Thank you very, very much. If you made it to the end, please like, comment, subscribe. Any of y'all are appreciated. Bye-bye. I'll see you with the rankings this week.